The avoidant has spent their entire life perfecting strategies to avoid rejection, to control their emotional exposure, to ensure they are never the one left devastated by someone else's departure. They withdraw before they can be abandoned. They maintain distance that prevents others from getting close enough to wound them deeply. They develop defended position, where they appear to need nothing from anyone, where their emotional unavailability protects them from the pain of caring too much about someone who might leave. This defensive structure has worked throughout their life, keeping them safe from the rejection that their early experiences taught them was an inevitable consequence of vulnerability. Then you do something the avoidant never anticipated, something their defensive playbook has no strategy for managing. You do not reject them with anger that they can dismiss as overreaction. You do not leave with pain they can minimize as your inability to handle their complexity. You do not depart with desperate attempts to make them understand that they can use to confirm their belief that others are too needy. Instead, you reject them through complete emotional withdrawal that mirrors their own patterns, through indifference that communicates they have become irrelevant to your emotional landscape, through self-focus that demonstrates you have genuinely moved beyond investing energy in someone incapable of reciprocating. This rejection penetrates every defense the avoidant has constructed because it denies them the very reactions their defensive structure is designed to handle. You caused this worst rejection not through what you did to them, but through what you stopped doing for them, not through how you left, but through how completely you released them, not through your emotional intensity, but through your absolute lack of it. The avoidant discovers that the rejection they spent their life avoiding was not someone leaving with pain, but someone leaving with peace. Not someone needing them desperately, but someone needing them not at all. Not someone fighting for the relationship, but someone walking away as if the avoidant was simply another person who did not warrant continued investment. The rejection is not your anger, but your indifference. The avoidant has prepared their entire psychological defense system to handle rejection, delivered through anger, hurt, or desperate pursuit. They know how to minimize someone's pain by suggesting that person is too sensitive or demanding. They understand how to deflect anger by characterizing it as irrational overreaction to their reasonable need for space. They have practiced dismissing pursuit by framing it as neediness that confirms their decision to maintain distance. These defensive responses have protected the avoidant throughout their life, allowing them to avoid fully experiencing the impact of their patterns on others. The avoidant can walk away from angry confrontations, hurt accusations, or desperate pleas with their defended position intact, their self-concept preserved, their belief that others want too much reinforced. Your indifference eliminates every defensive strategy the avoidant has developed. When you stop caring whether they reach out, stop monitoring their behavior, stop investing emotional energy in understanding their patterns, you remove the emotional intensity that the avoidance defenses are designed to manage. The avoidant discovers that they have no response to someone who simply does not care anymore, no way to minimize what is not being expressed, no method to deflect from reactions that are not occurring. Your emotional neutrality toward them creates void. Their defensive structure cannot fill because all their defenses require your emotional investment to work against. The avoidant initially cannot believe your indifference is genuine. They assume you are employing strategy to make them miss you, that your coldness is calculated to trigger their pursuit, that beneath your neutral exterior, you are still emotionally engaged and simply hiding it to manipulate their response. The avoidant tests this assumption through various means, reaching out with messages designed to provoke reaction, creating situations that should trigger your concern, displaying vulnerability calculated to activate your caregiving impulses. When these tests meet continued indifference, when your responses remain consistently neutral or absent entirely, the avoidant must face that your disengagement is authentic rather than performed. This recognition devastates the avoidant in ways that anger never could. Anger confirms that they still matter to you, that their behavior generates strong feeling, that they occupy significant space in your emotional world, even if that space contains hurt or frustration. Anger means you still care enough to feel intensely about them, still invest energy in wishing they were different, still maintain hope that they might change. Your indifference communicates the opposite, that you have stopped caring whether they change, stopped investing energy in them at all, stopped maintaining any hope about who they might become. The avoidant has gone from being someone who matters intensely, even negatively, to someone who does not matter at all. The avoidant's self-concept has incorporated their ability to affect others deeply. Even when relationships ended poorly, even when people left with pain, the avoidant could tell themselves they had profound impact, that they mattered enough to generate intense feeling. This belief protected the avoidant's ego while allowing them to maintain distance. They could be unavailable while still feeling significant because their unavailability created such strong reactions in others. Your indifference strips away this protection. You demonstrate through your emotional neutrality that the avoidant's presence or absence in your life generates no significant feeling, that they have become as remarkable as anyone else you might encounter and dismiss without second thought. The avoidant begins experiencing what they have inflicted on others throughout their relational life, the crushing awareness that someone they cared about, someone who knew them intimately, has evaluated them and found them so lacking that they do not merit emotional investment of any kind. The avoidant has made others feel insignificant through their withdrawal, their emotional unavailability, their treatment of intimate partners as optional rather than essential. Your indifference returns this experience to them, forcing them to feel what it means to be treated as disposable, as not worth the effort of continued engagement, as someone whose value is so minimal that even anger would be wasted energy. The avoidant also confronts that your indifference reflects accurate assessment rather than emotional overreaction. When people left with anger, the avoidant could dismiss their perspective as distorted by emotion, as clouded by hurt that prevented them from seeing clearly. Your indifference carries the weight of calm evaluation. You are not reacting emotionally, but rather responding rationally to what the avoidant has consistently demonstrated, that they cannot provide what relationship requires, that their defensive structure prevents genuine intimacy, that continued investment in them is poor use of emotional resources. This rational quality makes your rejection impossible to dismiss as misunderstanding or overreaction. The avoidant discovers that indifference represents the ultimate rejection because it communicates that they are not worth fighting for, not worth being angry at, not worth the emotional expenditure that caring requires. You have categorized them as person who merits no more attention than countless others you encounter and dismiss daily. The avoidant realizes they have become forgettable to someone who once knew them deeply, optional to someone who once prioritized them, irrelevant to someone who once cared profoundly. This recognition cuts deeper than any angry accusation because it cannot be defended against, cannot be minimized, cannot be reframed as the other person's emotional dysfunction. Your indifference also eliminates the avoidant's ability to maintain imaginary connection after the relationship ends. The avoidant typically keeps former partners in their psychological orbit by assuming those people still think about them, still care about their well-being, still maintain emotional investment even after departure. Your genuine indifference destroys this comforting fiction. The avoidant must face that you have genuinely moved on, that you spend no time thinking about them, that you have released them so completely that they have faded from significance in your emotional landscape. The avoidant experiences the complete erasure they unconsciously feared more than any dramatic rejection. You stopped seeing them as someone worth understanding. Throughout the relationship, you invested tremendous energy attempting to understand the avoidant's patterns, to decode their withdrawal, to make sense of their emotional unavailability. You researched attachment theory, read about avoidant defensive structures, tried to see beneath their behavior to the wounds driving it. You gave them the benefit of doubt repeatedly, interpreting their distancing as fear rather than indifference, their coldness as protection rather than rejection, their unavailability as limitation rather than choice. This investment in understanding them communicated that you saw them as a complex person worth the effort of decoding, as someone whose behavior had meaning that merited examination. The avoidant took this investment for granted, without recognizing it as gift. They assumed that of course you would try to understand them, that naturally you would interpret their behavior charitably, that obviously you would invest energy in seeing beneath their defenses. The avoidant never considered that your sustained effort to understand them reflected your choice to see them as worthy of that effort. That you were actively deciding to invest in comprehending someone who made themselves deliberately difficult to understand. The avoidant experienced your understanding as automatic rather than as generous choice you were making repeatedly. When you stop trying to understand them, when you cease investing energy in decoding their patterns or interpreting their behavior charitably, you deliver rejection that cuts deeper than explicit criticism. You communicate through your withdrawal of understanding that the avoidant is not worth the effort anymore, that their patterns are no longer worthy of your intellectual and emotional energy, that you have concluded they are exactly what they appear to be rather than complex person whose behavior merits deeper examination. This withdrawal represents profound devaluation because it says the avoidant does not merit the very thing that made them feel seen throughout the relationship. The avoidant feels this shift viscerally, even when you do not articulate it explicitly. They recognize that you no longer ask questions trying to comprehend their withdrawal, no longer seek explanations for their behavior, no longer attempt to see beneath their defenses to the fear driving their patterns. You take their behavior at face value rather than searching for deeper meaning. When they create distance, you accept that distance without trying to understand what triggered it. When they withdraw, you let them go without attempting to decode what they are protecting themselves from. This acceptance without understanding communicates that they have become too simple to merit analysis, too transparent to require interpretation. The avoidant also loses the validation that your attempts to understand them provided. When you work to comprehend their patterns, you implicitly communicated that those patterns had legitimate source, that the avoidant's defensive structure made psychological sense, that their wounds explained their behavior even if it did not excuse it. This validation allowed the avoidant to maintain belief that they were not simply choosing distance, but rather responding reasonably to genuine psychological necessity. Your effort to understand them confirmed that their behavior was complex response to complex history rather than simple failure to show up in relationship. When you stop seeking understanding, you remove this validation. The avoidant must face that perhaps their patterns are not complex defensive responses, but rather straightforward emotional unavailability. Perhaps their withdrawal is not sophisticated protection mechanism, but simple inability or unwillingness to engage in intimacy. Perhaps their behavior does not merit the charitable interpretation and deep analysis you were providing, but rather reflects exactly what it appears to be: someone who cannot or will not provide emotional presence that relationship requires. This loss of charitable interpretation forces the avoidant to confront less flattering understanding of their patterns. The avoidant realizes retroactively that your investment in understanding them represented form of love they never adequately appreciated. You cared enough to see them clearly, to examine their behavior with curiosity rather than judgment, to seek the human beneath their defenses. You treated their patterns as worthy of compassionate analysis rather than simple dismissal. This represented profound gift because most people, when faced with the avoidant's consistent withdrawal, simply leave without investing energy in understanding why. You gave them something rare, genuine attempt to see them fully, to comprehend their defensive structure, to hold space for their wounds while still maintaining boundaries about what you would accept. When you withdraw this understanding, when you stop seeing them as worthy of this level of engagement, you reject not just their behavior but their fundamental complexity as person. You say through your withdrawal that they are not interesting enough to warrant continued analysis, not complex enough to merit sustained attempt at comprehension, not valuable enough to justify the intellectual and emotional labor that understanding them required. The avoidant discovers that being seen as simple and dismissed is far more painful than being seen as complex and criticized. Your criticism acknowledged their significance even while challenging their behavior. Your withdrawal of understanding erases their significance entirely. The avoidant also loses the sense of being known that your understanding provided. Despite their defended position, despite their withdrawal, the avoidant experienced your attempts to understand them as form of being seen. You witnessed their patterns, recognized their defensive structure, understood the fear driving their behavior. This knowing, even when uncomfortable, created connection the avoidant did not consciously value. The avoidant felt less alone in their defended position because someone was trying to comprehend why they maintained it. Your understanding meant someone saw them even as they tried to remain invisible. When you stop trying to understand them, the avoidant faces that no one sees them anymore, that they have returned to the isolation their defensive structure creates. You no longer witness their patterns because you no longer care to analyze them. You no longer recognize their defensive structure because it is no longer your concern. You no longer understand the fear driving their behavior because that fear is no longer something you invest energy in comprehending. The avoidant discovers that their defended position, which was supposed to protect them from the vulnerability of being known, has succeeded completely. They are now unknown, unseen, unwitnessed, and this achievement feels like profound loss rather than defended victory. You chose yourself over the relationship they took for granted. The avoidant has organized the entire relationship around implicit assumption that you would continue prioritizing connection with them over your own needs, that you would sacrifice your well-being to accommodate their limitations, that you would remain invested in the relationship even when they provided minimal reciprocation. This assumption allowed the avoidant to maintain their defended position without consequences. They could withdraw knowing you would stay. They could offer emotional scraps knowing you would accept them. They could prioritize their need for distance over the relationship's health, knowing you would compensate through increased effort. The avoidant took your continued investment as permanent fixture, as guarantee that allowed them to remain defended while still maintaining connection. Your choice to prioritize yourself represents fundamental betrayal of the unspoken contract the avoidant believed governed your relationship. The avoidant expected that you would continue putting the relationship first, continue accommodating their limitations, continue hoping they would eventually become more available. When you redirect your energy from trying to make the relationship work to focusing on your own well-being, when you choose your peace over continued pursuit of someone emotionally unavailable, when you decide your needs matter more than maintaining connection with someone who cannot meet those needs, you violate every expectation the avoidant held about your role in their defended life. This choice delivers rejection the avoidant never anticipated because it mirrors their own behavior while forcing them to experience its consequences from the other side. The avoidant has consistently chosen their defended position over the relationship's needs. They have prioritized their comfort with distance over your need for presence. They have selected their emotional safety over the vulnerability that intimacy requires. They have put themselves first throughout the relationship while you put the relationship first. When you finally match their self-prioritization, when you choose yourself with the same consistency they have chosen themselves, you force them to experience what it feels like to be on the receiving end of someone's decision that their own well-being matters more than maintaining connection. The avoidant cannot criticize your self-prioritization without condemning their own patterns. If choosing yourself over the relationship is wrong, then the avoidant has been wrong throughout the entire dynamic. If prioritizing your needs over connection is selfish, then the avoidant has been selfish in every withdrawal, every instance of emotional unavailability, every choice of distance over intimacy. Your self-focus holds up mirror that reflects the avoidant's consistent behavior back to them, forcing them to either accept that self-prioritization is reasonable, in which case they cannot fault you for it, or condemn it as selfish, in which case they must acknowledge their own selfishness throughout the relationship. The avoidant experiences your self-choice as profound rejection because it communicates that you have evaluated the cost of maintaining relationship with them and determined that cost exceeds the value. You are not leaving because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself more than you care about preserving connection with someone who cannot reciprocate adequately. This calculation, that your well-being is worth more than relationship with them, delivers devastating message about the avoidance value. They are not worth the continued sacrifice, not worth the ongoing accommodation, not worth the persistent hope that they might change. Your choice also exposes that the relationship was sustained primarily through your effort rather than through mutual investment. When you stop choosing the relationship over yourself, the entire structure collapses because you were the only one holding it together. The avoidant provided minimal investment while you provided maximum effort. The avoidant maintained their defended comfort while you sacrificed your needs. The avoidant took for granted that you would continue this imbalance indefinitely. Your choice to stop carrying the relationship reveals that the connection the avoidant believed they had was actually your construction, your effort, your choice to remain despite their consistent unavailability. The avoidant must confront that they have been in a relationship where one person was doing all the work, where connection existed only because someone was willing to maintain it unilaterally, where the appearance of partnership masked fundamental imbalance. This recognition forces the avoidant to face that they were not truly in mutual relationship, but rather were allowing someone else to have relationship with them, passively receiving someone else's investment while offering almost nothing in return. Your choice to stop providing that unilateral effort exposes how little the avoidant was actually contributing. The avoidant also experiences your self-choice as abandonment that mirrors their worst fears, while being entirely their fault. The avoidant has spent their life defending against abandonment through preemptive withdrawal, through maintaining distance that prevents others from getting close enough to leave them devastated. Yet your choice to leave, to prioritize yourself, to stop accommodating their limitations, represents exactly the abandonment the avoidant feared. The cruel irony is that the avoidant created this abandonment through their own patterns. You left not randomly, not because you wanted to hurt them, not because you could not handle their complexity, but because the avoidant's consistent emotional unavailability made staying a form of self-abandonment you finally refused to continue. The avoidant cannot blame external factors or claim they were blindsided, because your choice followed clear pattern of their behavior, failing to meet your communicated needs. You expressed throughout the relationship what you needed. You articulated your limits. You communicated when those limits were being violated. The avoidant chose repeatedly to maintain their defended position rather than stretch toward meeting your needs. Your eventual choice to prioritize yourself represents logical consequence of the avoidant's consistent choice to prioritize their defended comfort. The avoidant must face that they were given opportunities to choose differently, to choose the relationship, to choose you, and they declined every opportunity until you stopped offering them. Your self-choice also eliminates the avoidant's ability to maintain victim narrative about the relationship's end. When people left with anger or hurt, the avoidant could position themselves as victim of others' inability to accept them, of others' excessive demands, of others' emotional instability. Your calm choice to prioritize your well-being over continued accommodation of their limitations cannot be twisted into victimization of the avoidant. You are not punishing them, not rejecting them out of anger, not leaving because you could not handle them. You are simply choosing yourself, recognizing that relationship with them costs more than it provides, deciding that your peace matters more than maintaining connection with someone incapable of reciprocating adequately. The avoidant discovers that your self-choice represents rejection they cannot defend against, cannot minimize, cannot reframe as your failure. You have done exactly what the avoidant has done throughout the relationship, chosen your own well-being over vulnerable connection. The difference is that your choice came after years of trying to make the relationship work, after exhausting every strategy to create intimacy with someone defended against it, after recognizing that continued sacrifice of your needs would destroy you without transforming them. The avoidant's choice to prioritize themselves came easily, automatically, without question. Your choice came after tremendous struggle and represented last resort rather than first response. This difference makes your self-choice undeniable commentary on the avoidant's value. You tried everything before concluding that choosing yourself was necessary for your survival. You demonstrated the emotional freedom they claim to want. The avoidant has spent their entire life claiming to value emotional independence, to prefer autonomy over intimacy, to choose freedom over the obligations that relationship entails. They have presented their defended position as conscious preference rather than fear-based limitation. The avoidant has told themselves and others that they simply value their independence too highly to compromise it for relationship, that they prefer their autonomous life to the constraints that partnership creates, that their emotional distance reflects authentic choice rather than defended necessity. This narrative has protected the avoidant from confronting that their position is prison rather than palace, that their distance stems from fear rather than preference. You shatter this narrative by demonstrating genuine emotional freedom that looks nothing like the avoidant's defended isolation. You show that true freedom includes capacity to move fluidly between connection and solitude, based on authentic choice rather than defensive necessity. You maintain your sense of self while being in relationship, proving that intimacy does not destroy autonomy when two secure people choose each other. You demonstrate that emotional independence means having internal resources to navigate life's challenges rather than reflexively avoiding vulnerability. Your freedom is actual liberation, while the avoidant's defended position reveals itself as constraint disguised as choice. The avoidant watches you thrive after leaving them, observes you experiencing joy they never witnessed during the relationship, sees you engaging fully with life in ways that contrast sharply with your depleted state, while trying to maintain connection with them. This visible flourishing exposes that the relationship was draining you, that accommodating the avoidance limitations was costing you vitality and peace, that life without them represents expansion rather than loss. The avoidant must face that their presence in your life was diminishing rather than enhancing it, that their emotional unavailability created burden, that removal of that burden allows you to finally experience freedom. Your demonstrated freedom also reveals the falseness of the avoidant's claimed preference for independence. The avoidant maintained that they valued autonomy over connection. Yet, your actual autonomy, your capacity to be genuinely self-sufficient while remaining open to intimacy, looks entirely different from the avoidant's rigid isolation. You can be alone without loneliness because you have rich internal life and secure sense of self. You can engage in relationship without losing yourself because you maintain boundaries rooted in self-knowledge rather than fear. You move between independence and interdependence with flexibility the avoidant cannot access because their defended position is fixed rather than fluid.